Now, just on Trump, and a new poll has recently revealed that Canadians seem to approve of Trump over their Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Can you explain this polling data to us?
I mean, let's be honest, Canada is a mess. Whenever there's a story about Canada, it's almost never good. It seems like every night or several times a week, I'm looking at, I mean, it looks like the Gaza Strip there. There's violence, there's extremism. It's an example of what happens when the leader of a country is a left-wing extremist. And you compare that to Donald Trump's record, and it's much better. Just this week, there was a major international event where they were essentially reopening, rededicating the Notre Dame because it had been refurbished after the big fire. And Donald Trump showed up there. And this might be subjective, but really the way that he was interacting with the heads of state, it made me feel almost like America was back. And you contrast that with some of the left-wing leaders, Trudeau and even Joe Biden, and there really just isn't that same international reception.
Yeah, the gravitas that goes along with it. Now, moving on to Syria, as I mentioned at the top, look, the world, we've just seen this huge change in the landscape in Syria in a matter of days. What's the latest there at the moment?
It's been absolutely unbelievable to watch the last couple weeks in Syria. Remember, there was an enormous war that happened between Assad and all of these Islamist rebels, and it went on for years, and there were hundreds of thousands of deaths and hundreds of thousands, even more, of millions of displaced people. And just in a matter of a couple weeks, the so-called rebels, what we want to Assad's opposition, just steamrolled through the country with almost no opposition deposing Assad. And so what we're now seeing is that these, so-called rebels are in a leadership role. They are now the government, in a way reminiscent of what happened in Afghanistan, where the Taliban was in the opposition. Obviously, they were tinged very badly with terrorism, and then they became the government. And that's what we're seeing now in Damascus.
Now, look, there has been plenty of discussion about these rebels, and obviously they've taken over huge swathes of Syria. What does this mean for the transfer of power? I mean, obviously people are delighted at the fall of the Assad regime, no doubt, but what are they actually getting in its place?
It's an extremely difficult picture in terms of the inclination to root for one side or the other. And the reason is because so many of the actors in Syria were frankly terrible. So Assad, gassed his people. Just this past day, they've opened the prisons. Essentially, they were dungeons, torture chambers for thousands of Syrians. Assad, of course, was in cahoots with Hezbollah and other Iranian terrorist proxies. On the other hand, he's been deposed now, and the people who have been empowered are literally former Islamic State and Al Qaeda guys. So the leader of the main rebel group, which we call HTS, he was a subordinate of Baghdadi, the leader of Islamic State. He went into Syria and branched out and was the founder of the Al Qaeda affiliate in Syria. These are Salafi jihadists. They're Islamists. Their political views are very extreme. They have a tremendous amount of blood on their hands. And now the leadership is saying all the right things. They're saying that today is a different day, that they understand the urgency of moderation, that they want to preside over the entire country, and they're not going to pursue the minorities, and they are eschewing terrorism, and they want to be removed from being designated as a terrorist group. So the leadership is savvy. Whether or not it's actually predictive of their behavior remains to be seen. Personally, I think that we're in a period of elevated international terrorism risk. One of the things
Mm.
Assad used to do in Syria, in addition to completely mistreating his population and sometimes killing them, is that the Syrian Arab army would actually confront Islamic State. And so now there are real questions about, will there be an Islamic State resurgence without the Syrian Arab army? Will there be a power vacuum? And how will the new government respond to Islamic State? And it's really for that reason that over the past couple of days, the United States has really amped up its bombing of Islamic State targets. I am happy to see Assad go. I am happy to see a weakening of the so-called axis of resistance, a weakening of Iran and its terrorist proxies. But I do worry that these radical Sunni militants will continue with their extreme ways, and that we may actually see an elevated terrorism risk internationally.
And not only that, but also danger, I suppose, for those minority communities within Syria, the Druze, the Christians and the Kurds. And I just want to go back to this rebel leader, al-Jilani, former al-Qaeda commander. The left-wing media seem to be reporting, like you said, as if he's moderated and enlightened and, excuse the pun, has had his road to Damascus moment. No doubt you'll all, and we all remember the commentary around the Taliban after the fall of Afghanistan, this latest on this latest occasion, they were all going to be new aged and inclusive, and look what we've seen play out in Afghanistan. Is there the possibility that we see this also happen in Syria, and have the left wing media maybe just been a little too optimistic too early?
Yes, I think that that's a good way to put it. I do think that they're too optimistic too early. HTS has an absolutely terrible track record. The leader was Islamic State as well as Al Qaeda at a very high level. He was the subordinate to Baghdadi. So we'll see how much this group has genuinely moderated. It should also be said that the task before HTS is enormous. Syria is a very fractured country with many different kinds of demographic groups. You have the Sunni majority, but you also have Alawites, you have Kurds, and people in between. And Syria is not a country with a tradition historically of democracy, certainly not liberal democracy. And so I really don't expect things to go that smoothly for this new government. I will be surprised if the government is able to, even provide basic services into the future. I will be surprised if these groups, are not victimized. You also have to include the fact that Turkey has its eyes on ramping up attacks even more against the Kurds. Does the government in Damascus, how will it respond? Erdogan views the government as an ally. So I worry in particular about the Kurds. They were really our main ground forces during the heyday of Islamic State and helped us to defeat the caliphate there. I also have concerns that with this new government, it will spur attacks even outside the region. When HTS assumed power just over the past couple of days, it was immediately congratulated by the Taliban, by Hamas, by a branch of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and by multiple Al Qaeda affiliates. I find it very hard to believe that we're going to have a good impression of a government that is being celebrated by so many of the worst terrorists in the world.
I totally agree. And look, we're just going to have to wait and see. It'll also be interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks with the changing presidency in the US. I mean, who knows what is going to happen? We'll all have to wait and see. Thank you so much, Max Abrahms.